Whereas the Azimio La Umoja team, of course, led by Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, called off this week's demonstrations, they still insist that demands remain on the table. Among others are, the investigations around the servers and the demand for an audit into the same, but also the standard of living. Precisely, the price of unga must go down to 100 Kenyan shillings, but also issues around electoral reforms and the spirit of multi-party dispensation are still demands on the table for Kenya Kwanza to deal with. William Ruto, on the other side, His Excellency insists that Kenya is a constitutional democracy and there shall be legal means through which the grievances being raised by the other camp shall be addressed. That is part one of this afternoon's conversation. We also know that last week, the leader of opposition, Right Honorable Mathias Mpuga, did present to the country what they defined as a human rights-based approach towards budgeting here in Uganda. We shall look into the nitty-gritties therein. But then lastly is the USA Africa Summit on Democracy, and we shall pick recommendations regarding the same. Viewers, to put all this into perspective, is a panel of distinguished eminent citizens of this country that is now my honor to introduce to you. And in no particular order, is the only lady on the show. She has been missing for a while. Dr. Sarah Bireete is the Executive Director of Center for Constitutional Governance. Doctor, thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Moses, and I'm glad to be back on the Citizens Chat Show.
Yeah, hope you're back with the bang. Yes, on the extreme left is Council Godbar Tushabe. Godbar is the Executive Director of Great Lakes Research Institute.
Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies.
GLISS.
I also have a very small position called Associate Director.
Yes, Godbar, thank you for being here.
It's a great pleasure to be here. I have also been missing in action, but I'm really delighted to be back. And greetings to you all, our viewers.
Thank you for being here. Next to Godbar, and the guest today is Mr. Henry Muguzi, who is the Executive Director of ACFIM Uganda. Mr. Henry, thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Moses. It's an honor for me to be here. I think the last time I was here was quite a long time. So it's quite an honor for me to be here.
So I need to go and lobby and also become Executive Director.
No. I want to be Associate Director. I want to be Associate Director because, then you have somebody to
exactly,
to dialogue with in deciding which direction the organization should, especially in terms that are as turbulent as these ones.
But by and large, we're glad to have you. Good, but let me just start with you right away. The events in Kenya, the winner-take-all political system. Is Kenya paying the price for its sort of political polarization?
First of all, I think, let me just put it this way, that Kenya is, as President Ruto says, Kenya is a constitutional democracy. I think they have been building, and it comes, the Kenya comes very far away from the times of President Moi. Really, Moi ran that country more or less like close to what we would call a kleptocracy under KANU. KANU became a very corrupt and violent machinery. By the time he left power, what we know as the General Service Unit of the Kenya Police was more or less like the equivalent of what has been CMI here. By the way, I think I should note that in the recent past, CMI has gotten out of the stories of violence. I think we should congratulate the leadership of CMI now, because for some time I think they haven't been associated with too much violence. But if
are they scared of Magnitsky? What happened to their predecessor?
I think that the gentleman who is now the head of CMI is one of the most professional officers. The gentleman called Virunji. I think he's one of the most professional officers of the UPDF, and I believe if you are a trained officer, and you have earned your ranks by through the legitimate means, you should not be given a position and then you are used by your commanders to do the wrong things. I think that as a professional soldier, you should be able to set the rules by which an institution, or you should make sure that the institution operates by the rules that governs it. But the point I was making that historically, if you saw the way CMI was operating, arresting people right, left, and center, violating these rules, that's how general service unit used to work. So we come to the end of the Moi era, and I think the important lesson that we learn, that I think Ugandans can learn from Kenya, is that the end of Moi era was brought about by the collective resistance of Kenyan citizens. Nobody basically went and said, I am giving you this freedom. Yeah, so what we can learn about Kenya is that the post-Moi Kenya was actually fought for by the collective resistance of Kenyans. There is no single group that can claim that they fought the Moi dictatorship. So the main coalitions, the main coalition of the anti-Moi resistance had the opposition political parties, it had the religious leaders and institutions. The Kenya Law Society was at the front line of the resistance. Kenya Law Society, Kenya Commission of Jurists, the civil society, and then probably most importantly, the students at the University of Nairobi. So this is basically the kind of coalition that resisted Moi's dictatorship, and they were able to dismantle it, and the Moi era ended. And Kenya, I think, was also lucky that they got President Mwai Kibaki to take over, because this was an accomplished public servant with a track record, with a history, and I think no matter his imperfections, Mwai Kibaki acted with a level of dignity, because I think my view is that Mwai Kibaki may not have declared a major policy, major transformative policies, but I think he stabilized that country and enabled the institutions of state to emerge and work. He enabled the consolidation of the new constitutional framework that had been negotiated. And so I think for me, that's a big lesson to learn from there. Now, in our case here in Uganda, we have a challenge, because we have the guys who went to the bush, they trained their army, fought a war, came and captured the state institutions, and all they have done for the last 37 years now, all President Museveni and his group has done, is to reconfigure the institutions of state to be able to perpetuate regime survival. That while they have delivered a lot, I think in terms of if you are looking at the positive things that President Museveni and his group has done, you are not short of those. But also the failures are also, it's a big record of failures. And so Kenya is a country that is on the move. What I see, the current stalemate, where the Azimio coalition is raising a number of issues, whether it's cost of living, whether it's elections, whether it is the appointment of the Electoral Commission. These are legitimate issues, and they should be addressed. And I think Kenya has also demonstrated that when there is a stalemate, all their leaders climb down and come down knowing that Kenya is bigger than each one of them. So I am pretty confident. I was not surprised that eventually Ruto and Raila eventually had to say, we need to sit down and talk, because that's what statesmen do. And I think that's part of what we are missing as a country, as Uganda.
Thank you very much, Godbar. Very elaborate points there. Henry, Godbar has hinted on the aspect of dialogue, but perhaps you could expand on it. That, the role of dialogue in state craftsmanship, could you help us expand on that? But as well as give us your own perspective regarding, what is happening. Kenya Kwanza, Azimio la Umoja, demonstration today, then next week it is called off. How exactly do you make all these happenings?
Yeah, of course, it's really regrettable, really, for us, for African democracies, that in almost immediately after elections, you have these occurrences. But of course, it stems from how the election was managed. I remember just last week, one of the former chairpersons of the Kenyan Electoral Monitoring Body, made a statement that it will be difficult to expect to have an honest election in a dishonest society. So these are the types of societies we have. But of course, but the learning you get from there is Godbar hinted on it. The ability of leaders to understand that country is bigger than personalities, and therefore, when it comes to national matters of national interest, that has to be seen to be reigning supreme. But also the if you hear from the Azimio la Umoja camp, it's not just raising pandemonium for pandemonium's sake, but they are articulating real issues that relate with the ordinary Kenyan, the issues of unga, price of unga, issues to do with the unemployment, issues to do with the price of fuel, and calling on the state to intervene. These are real issues. In another jurisdiction, you would have had name calling between the leaders, the two opposing leaders. But these have shown us that it's important to show leadership, and you do so by raising over and above trivialities and articulating those things that resonate with the interests of the citizenry. So I think that is one takeaway. But of course, the other takeaway is the learning that we need to entrench democracy. I remember very well during the election of Al Gore in the US, when he was convinced that the election was stolen, there's certain things that did not go well. When George Bush took office, I mean, he took back seat to allow the country to continue. Because in any case, issues that national interests should be much bigger than personal interests. So these are some of the things we need to learn. We are learning. But of course, then we could also be lessons for countries that are aspiring to toe the same line Kenya is towing in terms of democratization. That there are times in life when, even when you are in opposition, even when you feel that the election result did not go your way, you need to step in and take charge and get pressure to bear on the fellow in office, to act on some of the things. But I also liked the way they, when the demonstrations were ongoing, in my own thinking, I was imagining if I was, Ruto, I was in office, and this candidate was threatening to a million people march. I think what I would do, borrowing from the leaf of the playbook of the general here, I would have, made sure that there's preventive arrest of sorts. That this does not happen. But he allows it to happen because people must express themselves, and this is what democracy preaches.
Did they go as far as State House?
No, they didn't. But at least you did not see.
Okay. Thank you very much, Henry. Sarah, let me come to you. One of the issues in the Martha Koome-led Supreme Court that were raised in the petition were aspects of the servers. And if I may quote Martha Koome, she said that, court has been sent on a fishing expedition. I think what she meant was that there is no substantive evidence that perhaps the servers would produce that would warrant the overturn of the election. Raila Odinga continues to insist that the servers must be open. One is, where does that leave the Supreme Court decision? Does it place the Supreme Court decision at a point of jeopardy? One. Two is that the aspect of the cost of living. Is Azimio la Umoja cognizant of certain external factors that could be beyond the control of the Kenyan government? We know of the COVID-19 and now Russia-Ukraine, which has altered the global supply chains. Are they being unfair to a 4-month-old government and asking for all this?
No, I think like the previous panelists have argued, you have a contested election where the conflict resolution mechanisms were exhausted legally, but not satisfactorily. The Azimio coalition was clear on the outcome of the Supreme Court, saying they will respect the decision of court, but they were not satisfied. What that means in a democracy that is building institutions, striving to promote the rule of law, but also where you cannot rule out the underhand methods, is what Kenya is harvesting now. Most African countries, and I know we will be talking about the Summit for Democracy, are battling with the declining democracy, not only in the global south, but also in the global north, including the US, and you can look at challenges in the UK. I know some Ugandans thought that having 3 prime ministers in 3 months in UK was a crisis. But to me, it was a demonstration that when you build institutions, then they can withstand any kind of crisis, because human beings are not perfect. So we need to build our democracy. We need to build our processes based on values, based on systems and institutions, and move away from human beings. We can see what's happening in the US with the indictment of Trump. The courts are confident that everybody is under the law, nobody is above. Whether you are a sitting president, even in the US, you can be tried in court. You might not be arraigned physically, but you're not shielded from trial like in our African countries. And also, if you have committed any crime, however minor or a felony or whatever, then you are answerable to the institutions of the state. That's what every democracy should thrive to achieve. So when you have a dissatisfied camp that is more or less 50% of the country, because if you look at the margin, given that many people did not turn up to vote, but out of the cast vote, you have a victory of 200,000 votes, 230,000 to be precise.
Imagine.
Yes, just votes. It's like 1%.
Yeah.
So or less. And then you have contestations. You have people that are dissatisfied. True, we have the global wave of effects of Ukraine raising the cost of fuel, as well as the cost of wheat. But what are the mechanisms? What are the resilient mechanisms of our economies? Before Ruto came to power, the Kenyans, the local people, they are calling them, there's a Swahili name for those hustlers and
Wananchi.
no.
Mama
Mama
So,
Boga.
yes.
Yeah.
So they were, you can look at subsidies on fuel and portion as a small thing.
Yeah.
But to an ordinary person, it is very important and impactful. So when you say that you're taking 200 shillings off the cost of portion, you are helping so many families put food on table. And when you don't, then how many families, by that difference of 200 shillings, are they going to starve? Kenya has a crisis of hunger in some countries, some parts of the country. It has a crisis of prolonged drought and effects of climate change that we are all experiencing, but in different forms. So you have a starving population, you have a struggling ordinary class of people, and a large size of middle class. The upcoming corporates and working class. And also a sizable number of the A plus in society in Kenya. It's a big economy. I think about twice our economy or more. So you have people that can live comfortably in Kenya regardless of the cost of living. And Raila belongs to that class. And many leaders belong to that class really. They can still manage to live even with the crisis of the economy that we are all feeling in our pockets. I think at the beginning, when people raised concerns, one, you have a issue which is injury which is self-inflicted by Ruto on the Hustler Fund. If you look at the campaign promise of the Hustler Fund,
It was
and what was delivered, yes, delivered, established with interest,
Yeah.
that was never communicated to the people during the campaigns. So you have a failed promise of a fund, of enriching hustlers.
It's called the expectations gap.
Yes, so the expectations of the people, the hustlers, the hustlers are the majority of the protesters.
Yeah.
Because of that failed promise, the fund you promised on the campaign platform is not the fund you delivered in power. You delivered the money-lending process. So that is the first disappointment. Even when they were saying that we shall get rid of subsidies, but you will access money through the Hustler Fund. So who qualifies to access money? Who has capacity to pay it back? That's the number one disappointment of the people. Building into the unemployment and cost of living, where the campaign promise was, this should be dealt with and we shall fix it. And you have failed to fix it. Coupled with that is the legitimacy context. Whether it's unfounded or not, I think I don't have the facts as of now. I know that the legal process was exhausted, but people were not satisfied with that mechanism. The courts opened the servers, yes, but even in the submissions of court, the Azimio legal team is on record to have said that the report of the servers was manipulated.
Yeah.
So that remains contested up to today. It was contested in the hearing process. It is still a major contestation. I have seen religious leaders saying, why don't you open the servers? What are you hiding? Technology should help improve elections to the extent that evidence is preserved at all levels and is accessible to whoever wants it. If I was a Kenyan today, and I've been thinking that why don't like 2-3 citizens of Kenya, under the right of access to information, go to court and apply to access the servers? This is property of Kenyans. This is how the will of the people was exercised. This is how the social contract that Ruto and his government is enjoying and implementing was procured. Why should it be a secret? So if I was a Kenyan today, I would move to court under the right of access to information and apply to access servers. What is in those servers that should be top secret?
But I thought the same.
No, I'm saying away from the election process. This is now information that belongs to Kenyans. So the way you would go to court to apply to access oil contracts is the way a Kenyan citizen should go to court to apply to access servers. I've now moved away. The petition ended. I am looking at today. Why can't Kenyans go to court and ask if that is the issue? Because I've seen it as a major issue. Why don't Kenyans go to court, apply to access information on the servers? Because it's part of the right of access to information. And then they will know what is in those servers. So that's my take on the servers. Whether Raila is right or wrong now can only be determined if anybody accesses the original information.
I want to bring in Captain. Captain, just last week, Raila Amolo Odinga declared Monday to be the mother of all demonstrations. And Sunday night, a meeting overturned everything. I am curious, personally, to try and anticipate what could have been agreed upon in that meeting. Because from a very high intense...
Did they have a meeting?
There was an engagement. I want to believe so. That happened on Sunday.
Maybe
that
some subtle diplomacy by some of the leaders.
So I'm curious to know, how does a highly tense political moment zero down to calling off a demonstration to then dialogue? That is one. Two is that, in your honest opinion, do you think that Raila Amolo Odinga is, and of course Azimio, is taking advantage of an economic crisis to score political points?
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to thank you. The economic crisis you're talking about in Kenya was brought about by Kenyatta and Azimio. When they said they were going to subsidize because of the election so they could get the vote. Immediately, a poor country tries to subsidize with the money they don't have. Kenya has a debt of 70% ratio. Kenya has got problems with its finances, with the debts with the Chinese. Now, a country to subsidize what they don't have, which Museveni refused here. He said, we cannot subsidize now, the price will have to come down using economic forces.
Demand and supply.
Yes. And that's what's happening here. The prices are coming down in some areas they're still up and they will still come down. In Kenya, they put there that price and it shot the inflation up. Immediately they went into subsidizing. The economy went haywire. When this man came in power, he removed the subsidies so that the economic forces could work. So Azimio is not telling the truth. He should take the truth. Let's talk about the economy. How can the Kenyan economy be stabilized? There are experts in the central bank, there are experts in the Ministry of Finance who can tell you how the Kenyan economy can be stabilized. The Unga thing they are talking about is where they put money which they didn't have before those elections. Kenyatta and Azimio used all sorts of tactics to win those elections. And one of them was those subsidies. Now, apart from that, they also used other methods. They were the ones in power. So you cannot put it all on Ruto. Because I keep on hearing Ruto. Ruto was in the opposition at that time. And these guys were in charge. They even used the government money. They used the government machinery. Everybody knows this. They after the elections, even when they were at the place we were looking for election, when they had that fight in Langata, in Karen, again they were in charge. This man eventually won the elections through thick and thin. These people said, we are going to court, and they did. And the court was, we all watched it. It was done neatly. Everybody said that was a good process. They opened those servers. Even after opening the servers, the young man, the computer expert, proved those two lawyers that all the information they were giving was false, that the information they had brought to court was actually fake. So as far as I'm concerned, if a court of law eventually accepts that kind of information, and then you get out of court, say, no, we did not lose elections, we did not lose in court, let's open the servers again. Fine. They can open them at a reasonable price, but not by force. We have to find a better way to do it. Now, to go back to Kenya, my brother. Kenya got independence in 1963. Independence from a war of civilians called the Mau Maus and some other Kenyans. At independence, they had two big political parties. One was called KANU, the other one was called KADU. KADU was mainly coastal because Mombasa was not part of Kenya, as you know. It was joined on Kenya at independence. Now, that group from Mombasa called KADU wanted federalism, which is Majimbo. Are you with me? They said that Kenya could not be that. Odinga, the father of Raila, and Tom Mboya, and Uyo Obote had a group of union. Oh, Obote was there. Obote was brought from that group to come to Uganda to become a leader. Now, that group formed KANU, and they did not want Majimbo, they wanted one country. They wanted a unity, not a federal. That went on at independence. KANU won because of the combination of Oginga Odinga. Oginga Odinga actually stepped down. He was the leader of the KANU group. He stepped down for Kenyatta, and another gentleman gave Kenyatta his own seat. So he came into parliament. It was a very good civilian government. They started, they We had an opposition of Kadu, they had Kanu, and they went on. Over there, they had a few mixers, and in 1964, when we had the army mutiny in the whole of East Africa, the King African Rifles, Uganda had a different problem, but Kenya removed all the leaders and they brought Europeans to run the army. Tanzania removed the army completely. They started a new army. Kenya went on with the army, but it was now being built under the British. They got experts to build it. So the Kenyans left the business of the army to the Europeans, and in fact, those Europeans also started something called the GSU, General Service Unit. They went into business. The Kikuyus went into economy, and a lot of Luos went into education, and the people in Mombasa went into business. Kenya, the Kenyan, average Kenyan, is more economically orientated than he's militarily orientated. So business drives Kenya. Most of their politics is really on business. And therefore they protect their business. Now, all these things you're hearing, all these political parties you are hearing, they are coming from different groups because of that very reason. And then they form these big coalitions, which is like Azimio and the other one. Now, there's also a problem in Kenya, and the problem is tribalism. The Luos, the Kikuyus, the coastal, and the north. And the Maasais normally fall around the Kikuyu area. Now, with this as the environment, their politics is usually saved because they don't want to lose money. And therefore their politics is on those bases. That's why you hear Mount Kenya, sorry, the mountain group, the Luo group, and the coastal group. So when you come here, the good thing about Kenya is military will not be brought in. Security will not come into politics. It will be used to maintain peace, but it will not come in and say we are going to rule the country, because they've not had the problems we've had here. So now you have a situation where civilians have to find the situation. And the other day when they had this demonstration, they lost a lot of money. So the group said, wait a minute, we are losing money here. What do we do? And I was one of those who said, the Kenyans cannot survive this demonstration. They have to sit down and talk.
Okay.
And after the elections, they were 50-50. Ruto has 50%, the other guy had more or less 50%.
Yeah.
So the best thing they could do is what? Is to sit down and talk. And yes, on Sunday they sat, and the two of them only, by the way. Two of them. Yeah. The other people went to church.
Yeah.
And that's when the man came out and said, we now must stop. Now, the reason why dialogue is good, whatever the problems are, how big they are, you stop being arrogant and you find solutions to the problems of the country.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying that the Kenyan situation, the reason why it is going to be controlled is because of the economy. The Kenyans are aware that anytime they shake around a little bit, their country is not that very well off. They are sitting on eggs. Therefore, they've got to be very careful in how they do their things. And I'm very happy for them. I'm very happy that the president of Kenya and Mr. Raila have sat down and they have come. And in fact, the president has already passed on a letter saying that the requirements of the opposition, Raila and his opposition in parliament, should be taken very seriously. To me, that is a great
step forward. Thank you. Godbar, I want to bring you in.
Yeah.
And on the point of the economy, is that, first of all, put yourself in the shoes of William Ruto. You have a very high debt burden, but also you don't want to increase that. Therefore, you must find means of generating revenue domestically. So the issues around subsidies might be a very bitter pill to swallow. But also, secondly, is that, do you think that one of the underlying factors that isn't coming out in the public is the mere fact that, for example, Raila's company used to enjoy monopoly of producing gas in Kenya, but for the past few days, a new company has been, the past few months, a new company was auctioned to produce gas in Kenya. But also, the question around Brookside milk and how the Kenyan economy has been opened to more milk production from outside. So do you think that there are certain underlying economic factors that are personal in nature that could be also spying these disagreements?
I think, first of all, raised and underscore the economic foundations of the Kenyan politics that Francis has mentioned. That that country, incidentally, for me, I believe that Kenya is a very strong economy. No matter the undercurrents of debt and the commodity prices, because within this region, Kenya is still the big economy. It has an advantage, almost, that the international community has looked at Kenya as the gateway into East Africa. If you consider the number of airlines that fly into Nairobi directly, you think of the businesses, international businesses that are established in Nairobi. You think of the international institutions and diplomatic missions that are based in Nairobi. So they really bring in an element of some core resources that all the other economies within the region do not have. But also, I think I also agree with the business acumen of the Kenyans. I mean, you meet them here, and you even go in the small restaurants and you meet Kenyan workers. So as basic as even servers, you feel like there is a difference. I think there is an orientation towards business that Captain Babu has just mentioned. Secondly, I think the question of the military, that in fact, the time I spent in Kenya, one of the things that I observed was the fact that even with Moi's dictatorship, the most important things he didn't do was that he did not co-opt the military into the politics. Now, whether that has a historical explanation, as Captain Babu has said, could be a different matter. But what I know is that the Kenyan politics ran, the military remained almost a national army. The police, as I said, the segment of the police that was really abused and misused was the General Service Unit. The Kenyan police was considered to be very, very corrupt, but it remained an institution as an institution of the state. And then the other important thing is the public service. I think that under Moi's rule, the political class did not interfere with the public service system. And that's why I was saying that after Moi, with the stable hand of Mike Kibaki, these institutions rejuvenated and became the harbingers of progress and transformation in Kenya. Now, you get the politics that we are having now. I think that Kenya is at an advantage because their constitutional framework, which is almost framed around our own constitutional framework, established a wide range of alternative power centers. Now, you can comfortably forward see that from the time the new Kenyan constitution was adopted, the Kenyans have remained vigilant, trying to make sure that that constitution is not tampered with and its entire architecture dismantled. So you have the independence of the judiciary, which has been guaranteed both through the constitution but also the practice. That the citizens, when there are any laws that come to chip away on the powers of the judiciary, the citizens come in. But they're also demanding for more. You say, if you're going to appoint judges, they should be subject to an open process where citizens are participating. So in other words, at the end of the day, the judges you have almost have been hired by the citizens, because the citizens can participate in saying, no, the other person is not credible enough to hold the office of a judge. you can see the decentralization, the county government system. When you go back to our constitution, 1995 constitution, which people like Captain Babu were able to write, and again with all the imperfections you can think of, I still always argue and say, given our political circumstances, I think that was the minimum consensus that could be arrived at, and therefore we should congratulate ourselves on that. But you look at the decentralization system, the local government system, everything that we've done since then has been counter to what was negotiated and agreed. You can look at all the, so in other words, the point is the Kenyan system is increasingly being built on a system of checks and balances. The police force knows that you can't go to the street and shoot citizens because they are protesting, because you'll be held accountable for the actions that you have committed. It's not that you will all of a sudden hide into some amorphous groups that you will end up with. So I think that given the actions of the Ruto government in their first couple of months, did a couple of things that I think that also activated both his opposition, that is Raila and Azimio, but also a good cross-section of Kenyan citizens. One is that a number of actions were taken that gave the manifestation that Ruto could be working around building a dictatorship. Because you see, he was able to dismiss a number of public servants, that's the institution that has remained intact almost. I think the other thing was leveling new charges against the former Interior Secretary, and I think there was a feeling within the public that the charges were a witch hunt. And then the economic maneuvers that you have mentioned. These may not be clear policy directions that you can carefully see. They are designed to get back on Raila, on Uhuru and others. But essentially, if you are doing them in your first 100 days, 5 months of office, the population begin to see all of that, and they begin to get uncomfortable, and then it makes a situation like Azimio is claiming tenable. Because you see, Azimio, we can say, like Captain Babu has said, we say, oh, we had elections, the elections were litigated, we had a decision. The law does not solve political problems. It does not solve economic problems. Political problems are solved by politicians. So in other words, if the politicians still feel aggrieved, whether there was a Supreme Court decision or not, there must be a political process to resolve those grievances. You cannot just wish them away simply because the Supreme Court determined this and finished. So in other words, my point is that there are grievances. The other point, by the way, the economic situation.
Yeah, and my question there is, do you think Ruto finds himself between a rock and a hard place? You have a very high debt, but at the same time, there is all this political pressure coming from the Wananchi.
No, I definitely sympathize with President Ruto, because you are handed over an economy that is deeply in debt. Now, this is a sovereign debt, and unfortunately, those of us who teach international law, debts are one of those things that every state or government must succeed. You can't say this debt we cannot for it. I think when the countries have attempted to say no, this was contracted illegally, the sanctions that come with it are also not very tenable. Yeah. So I think that I sympathize with Ruto that he's taking over government. It's heavily in debt. And then, of course, the international conditions are not favorable. So all these economic pressures are there. I think that the one of the things I really value what he has done is to acknowledge that he needs to deal with the political questions Whether they are unfair or fair is a different matter.
He must deal with it.
He must deal with them for him to be able to stabilize the situation and put his hand on the economy, which I think is an urgent matter.
Yeah.
And I think Ruto must be congratulated for that.
All right, thank you. Henry, Kenya has an international criminal court decision, or perhaps you'd call it a hammer hanging on its shoulders. Do you belong to the school of thought that thinks that the restraint from both camps, because if you notice last week, the pressures was, the intensity was beginning to actually rise. Do you think that Kenyans paused for a second and said, hey guys, look here, given what happened in 2007 that led to ICC, and of course we know the outcomes of that particular decision, is that we don't want to go back there. And the critical players in this particular demonstration are almost the same players who were, mentioned back then. So do you think that the ICC aspect still lingers over the shoulders of the participants back then, and therefore they know that we don't want to get there again, and by all means they're forced to negotiate and to dialogue?
I think you would read between lines that the turmoil of 2007 was just one small mistake away, and of course the challenge that comes with the demonstrations is that you don't have control over who does what. And often there are people who would want to profit from such chaos. So at any one time you would have expected that there would be some rogue characters that would hide in the well-intended demonstrators in order to wreak havoc or loot or do something like that, in which case that would descend into chaos. But there was also fear of how that crowd was going to be managed. Because you see, the angers can flare up. In no minute, someone can just choose out of excitement to burn the tire, and then that escalates to burning a vehicle, and everything, all hell then would break loose. And therefore, I think that this was always at the back of everybody's mind. Also us in Uganda, because me who comes from Chotera, I know how badly damaged that road is now. And therefore, the fear of a repeat of what happened in Kenya when, the whole country was on a standstill, could not have, vehicles coming through. Was always on my mind and everybody's mind. So I would imagine that this was there. Ruto was there. Ruto has faced it together with Uhuru, the court, and of course, even when he was absolved, I think he always had this fear that there would be a few, shadows that would be pulled. There would be a few cases that would be resurrected. He wouldn't have wanted to have a repeat of what he went through. But also the idea that both these characters were present in what happened in the previous chaos. You don't want history to repeat itself. You want to be seen to be learning from past events. You want to be seen to be, acting and behaving like leaders. And in a situation where you have these characters you can't control, you give them one directive, they do the different one. I think they were always skating on thin ice. And thank God they now realize it and say, look, for the sake of stability and tranquility and making sure that the country goes on normally, let's bury our hatchets and let's make sure that there is peace. So I think that could have weighed into their thinking as they chose to step down.
I think they did appreciate that they're working on eggshells. Doctor, as we take a short commercial break, William Ruto insists that there shall be no handshake, but rather any issue shall be addressed in a constitutional manner and in a legally accepted manner. I don't know. Do you think this is what Raila didn't want to hear? Because perhaps from past experiences that he knows that when he builds political pressure, it leads to some form of handshake, that unlike we saw the BBI. So now that William Ruto insists that there shall be no handshake, how do you think Raila as an individual shall perceive that? Is it what he wants, or there are other underlying issues?
I know there were attempts to reconcile, Kenya by Uhuru Kenyatta through the BBI initiative. But the BBI initiative was struck down by courts. It was never implemented. So whether it was a good or bad idea, it remained an idea. It was never implemented. It never saw the light of day.
But I think in form I agree with you, but in substance I think Raila was really involved much more in the Uhuru administration in the second term.
Raila was a special representative of Kenya for infrastructure in the AU. That announcement was made before the BBI. Whether Raila's work as a special envoy for Kenya at AU makes him part of day-to-day running of government, I don't know. I don't know any other member of Raila's team then who was appointed in Uhuru's government. I am not aware. Other than Raila's job as a special envoy, which was announced before handshake, before BBI. I don't know any other member that was appointed. The James Orengos, they remained away. They were never part of Uhuru's government. I know that Uhuru, when Azimio was formed, his party joined Azimio, but also some members of his party joined the Kenya Kwanza.
Yeah.
So Uhuru's party basically was divided between Kenya Kwanza and Azimio. And I don't know whether that makes Azimio part of government, because Azimio was formed towards the campaign. So on that debate, I might not be a good person to comment. But in terms of tangible day-to-day running, I don't know any member of Raila's opposition that was appointed in Uhuru's government.
Because if you hear William Ruto's assertions, is that in the second term of the Jubilee government, he was ring-fenced.
No, he used that rhetoric to run away from the collective responsibility of Uhuru's government. But you cannot be a deputy president. You have not resigned. You have not relinquished any benefits of your office. And then you claim to be opposition. And then an opposition member who has a continental appointment of a special envoy becomes part of government, and for you are opposition. I am not really good at that, and I don't see it. I don't see it. So to me, it does not make sense. I know that Uhuru worked with Azimio, as well as some other members of Jubilee Party. Whether that makes Azimio part of incumbent Uhuru government, I don't think so. So, but when you look at the problems of Kenya being a high-risk state, and I know recently when we had the economic convention on debt convened by MOBS, one of the experts at the National Planning Authority said that as Uganda we are suffering from a fear of debt, that it's a new terminology economists are studying. But if you look at the debt of Japan and the US, it's above 100%. And I remember Biden, when he was moving a proposal for House of Representatives and Senate about a better infrastructure plan, which would then create jobs and revamp the economy, he was asked on whether he's worried about that. And he had this to say, and I just quote him verbatim, said, "We are not worried of that as the US because we have capacity to pay. Whatever we borrow builds into the economy, grows the economy, increases our output as a country, and we can pay back any level of debt." So going by the level of debt in developed countries, Japan and the US as examples, the US is above 100%. Japan
Doctor,
is towards 90%.
Should we compare those
No,
states
let me first make my point. Let me first make my point on that. So if countries borrow for the productivity of their economies, then debt ceases to be a worry. If you look at Tanzania, Tanzania's debt has risen up a bit. So you have Kenya as in a high according to IMF categorization, high risk debt. Tanzania follows a bit, Rwanda and Uganda is the lowest. Kenya and Tanzania borrowed for heavy infrastructure projects in the last 3-4 years. In Nairobi, Kenya did the fantastic expressway that has solved 50% of traffic jam problems when you are in town, between town and the airport. Previously, I would go to Nairobi and you know you have 2 hours of traffic jam.
3 hours.
2 to 3, nightmare. Today you need 25 to 30 minutes. So if, you know, there is a saying that time is money. So if we have to quantify the time we lose in traffic jam, in our potholes, now Kampala is a capital of potholes in the whole of Africa. You don't have any road that you can mention within the city. And I don't even know whether our leaders are bothered or not. So if you look at, in Kampala, you need now, if you are waking up in the morning and going to NBS or NTV, you need 2 hours. And you can be that. Even in those 2 hours, they might not be enough. Depending on what potholes you are.
No, if the minister is going to work, you wait for 30 minutes.
Wait for
Yes, they will also push you off the road. So if time is money, then in Uganda, we are indebted to time above 100%. With the time we lose to trying to connect. So if you borrow for standard gauge railway, Uganda, I don't know whether we've had economics on our side of standard gauge railway, which is a swamp.
We've had stuff. We've had people working on
We have people working on the standard gauge railway for the last 10 years. Or we have to show for it as swamps and rift valleys. Kenya is using their standard gauge railway for the last 3 years. Tanzania, the Dar es Salaam has changed face through that borrowing that is right above Uganda. So do you prefer a potholed capital state where you lose 100% of your time to the percentages of debt? I think the question is, you borrow for what purpose? And do you borrow to develop the economy so that the economy can service their own? I think that is our challenge as a country. It is not the percentage of debt.
All right, thank you. We are due for a short commercial break, but we shall pick it up from Kenya after this commercial break and then see how it goes. Keep it with us. See you after this.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that short commercial break. Captain, as we wrap up the Kenya conversation, is that still out of curiosity, I ask, where is His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta in all this?
Let me explain something to you. Kenyatta had one quality that other leaders in East Africa did not have. He liked to train Kenyans in different positions. And he trained that civil service from zero. He wanted the right people in the right places. And he did so with politicians. Unlike Uganda, which had a lot of politicians, the Kenyans started building them after independence. And Moi was one of his trainees. Moi was just a mere teacher.
No, I meant Uhuru Kenyatta.
I'm coming.
Okay.
I'm going to bring it to, this will bring you up to Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, when they trained, Moi learned that Kenyatta does not only train Kikuyus, he also trains other tribes. And that's why Kenyatta fell out with Odinga, because Odinga wanted only to train Luos. So he said, no, we train all our children together. So when Kenyatta died, one of the things Kenyatta put down is that Moi should become the president. And that is why the former Attorney General, Njonjo, insisted that this man become the president. Now, Njonjo never forgot that. And during his period, he was training. People never realized it, but he was training young people to become leaders. All these people you're seeing who are running around, it is Moi who trained them. And one of them is Kenyatta, Uhuru. And because the other man did a favor for him to make him president, he also wanted to do the favor by making his son the new president among the trainees. We're talking about Mudavadi, we're talking about Kalonzo, we're talking about, who is the other one? This man, Wetangula, we're talking about, Raila did not want to be part of that. He said he was above them. Are you with me? So this thing you are seeing now in Kenya was not done, public did not know it, but in the background, Mama Ngina Kenyatta, who had the script insisted that these people should be made like this. And that is why you see Raila is outside that group. He's not part of that group. He's always fighting. So during Moi, he fought, he wanted to become something. Moi refused virtually. So when they had agreed that these young people were still too young to become presidents, and they agreed on a transition of Mwai Kibaki, it was actually agreed. It is not something that came out of the blue. They sat down and agreed that he will be there as a bridge to get the new people to come in. So when he came in, for him to maintain that sanity, because Raila was getting very strong, they came with something called Mukati Nusu, half of the bread, dividing government. And that's how he became prime minister, Raila Odinga. Raila Odinga did not stop there. When they went for the election and Uhuru won, he brought again another system. He wanted another Mukati Nusu, but this time they called it the handshake. So he's been fighting to get something, and he's been fighting to have the Westminster system of government so that he's a prime minister. So Uhuru now becomes president with this very powerful guy who is about 50% like now, and they have to find a solution. And the solution was the handshake and that international job he got. Now that was to calm him down so that the government could what? Continue. Now the same thing has now come with this new government. So we are going to undergo the same sort of, they've got to come with some sort of agreement. So this thing you're talking about, handshake not being there, on Sunday that was a handshake as far as I'm concerned.
The meeting
Sunday,
itself was a handshake.
What came out of that was that please stop demonstration, please Parliament accept the opposition proposals, points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's one he did not agree with, but he agreed with the others. Are you with me? So that is the way the Kenyan thing has been moving. The handshake, Mukati Nusu, and so on and so forth. Now, Raila has been dying to be president. But the method he's been using always bring him back to the same level. And that's the level he's going to get throughout, even if they open those servers. So, Madam was we're always talking about the dollar, the mighty dollar and whatnot. There's something called, there's an international thing going on now between the dollar and the yuan.
Yeah.
And it's going to cause a war. Right now, Taiwan, Ukraine is going to disappear. We're going to go now to China. Because the money behind Ukraine is not NATO. It is United States using NATO. So, at the end of it all I am trying to say now, debt for what? I like when the PLO Lumumba recently said, central banks of Kenya, they have 54 currencies, they have got central banks everywhere. These are all Mickey Mouse banks. He called them Mickey Mouse. Why? Because the man in United States, in IMF and World Bank, controls all these banks. He's the one who decides what debt you should have. He even gives you the percentage that you should not go above 50 something. It's not the country that says, I don't want to borrow. It is the international community that is telling him, you cannot borrow beyond this. So, if Uganda or if Kenya borrowed money to go and get gold, our own gold, and excavate it, make it gold, bring it to the central bank, and we borrow to get that gold. You are borrowing for the right thing. But if you borrow money to go and have a luxury road in your village where nobody goes with a car, then that money is useless. So, all I'm trying to say, madam, stabilizing the politics and realizing our problem requires people of open mind. I don't care who this guy is. Can we work together and bring this country up?
Yeah. Bottom line.
Your problem in Uganda is not all these things. Your problem in Uganda, you're not united. You don't have a united country. Therefore, all these good things, democracy, what, cannot work. You have no order. You're talking about Kampala. Kampala is in chaos. You cannot have order in Kampala. So you need, first of all, to establish one thing. Unite this country. Two, you've got to bring about order. And to bring order is not by firing, but by creating a mindset change of the people.
Of the leaders.
Of the leaders. And the people. The leaders are the ones you have to use to...
For us, Captain, for us, the people, for our leaders, you change your mindset, we're following you.
The leaders also claim to
So, madam, we need a man or women, men and women, who can deliberately bring about leaders who are going to change the country. Not to bring Mickey Mouse leaders.
Deliberate is
real
the key.
leaders.
Yeah.
Real leaders. Leaders who are really determined and they've got the country at heart. Now, they are there. We have 45 million. Do not be told lies. Those guys, the Greeks said that we had citizens, we had tribesmen, and we had idiots.
Yeah.
Now, the citizens are only 10% of the country.
The rest are
idiots.
tribesmen and idiots.
Yes, tribesmen and idiots. The tribesmen, they want people who work in groups.
And you can see all of us around all over the
The
place.
idiots are the ones who are selfish. These are the ones who are in government now.
The idiots.
Yeah, the idiots.
Yeah, stealing iron sheets.
Because for them, they're just grabbing. No, I'm going to tell you the truth. It's a fact. And people have even come out with those numbers. Now, if you take the 10% of 45 million, 4.5 million, then take another 10% of that. 450,000 people. You get out of the 450,000 Ugandans who are good citizens, you change this country.
You change this country, yeah.
So the citizens need to work to suppress the idiots.
No, you don't suppress them. No.
Change their
You
mind.
do things they appreciate.
Mindset change.
Yes.
Because I think, Captain, what I'm hearing him say, even these idiots, they would also want to drive on
be
good
good,
roads. They also want to drive on good roads. They want to go to good health centers. They also
We're wasting so much time on non-issues.
Yeah.
You are right. I can borrow 100% if I am going to excavate diamond and gold and bring it in the central bank.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why
That's
not?
right. Why not?
Because
I
now
can
that
borrow.
diamond and gold, I can pay.
Yes.
You see? If I borrow that money because I want some luxury, it's useless.
Yeah, and you can't pay.
Yes.
Yeah, and you
So
can't pay.
we must borrow the money for a country to be able, but you just imagine, a Chinese has to come and excavate our gold and take it to China. Why can't we borrow to excavate that gold and put it in the central bank?
And sell it to China.
And then sell it to China.
Yeah.
Thank you, Captain. I have to bring in Godbar. Godbar, just two questions from me. One is that, is the silence of Uhuru Kenyatta too loud? That is one. Then secondly is that, could these demonstrations be motivated by the collapse of the dynasties?
Well, first of all, the dynasties, the people who are protesting, these are regular people. What
Who are being used by?
Yeah, but you see, in most cases, for people to be used, they have their own grievances. So, in other words, you can have a population of 40 million people. Each one of us in this room, we may have our own grievance. Yeah? And then we get someone who also has a grievance. And we know that if we can follow this person, but we are all following him for different reasons. Yeah. So in other words, that's why I keep on advising leaders. I say, at the end of the day, don't look at all these people and say, you see, you have a problem. In most cases, many of them, especially those who are violent, they are called goons, they are called idiots, they are called what? I'm like, no. At the end of the day, especially for us leaders, we have to understand these people. There is a reason. Their motivations are they are behaving the way they are behaving, and we cannot just sit back and say, "You guys, you are idiots, you are clowns." That's not enough, because that's not leadership. So when we say these protesters in Kenya, they are mobilizing around Uhuru, and I think everybody has said here, Uhuru had almost 50%. Sorry, Raila had almost 50% of the vote. So in other words, from the word go, no matter your claim of victory, if you are Ruto, you know that there is another 50% that didn't support you.
Yeah.
I think leadership demands that you have to be able to think how innovative can you be to make sure that this other 50% or part of it, actually I carry them along in terms of how I run government. Because if you don't, 50% of the population can be a problem.
It's true.
Now, we can now start dissecting why are these people protesting? Are they following Raila? Are they protesting because they are following dynasties? I think that's neither here nor there. My view is that there are issues that are being raised. Leadership requires that these issues are addressed. How you address them and the end product may be a different matter. But I think the leaders, and I think Ruto has showed leadership by saying, no, we can have a conversation about this issue. He has also articulated very important principles and say, let's do it within the framework of the Constitution, within the framework of the law, so that then you don't also open up chaos, because sometimes you can try to solve a problem and then you open yourselves to chaos. So, and I think the Kenyan system, the Kenyan constitutional framework has the mechanisms to address all these grievances, both real and imagined. And I think they'll do that. I am very, very confident that Kenya will overcome the current stalemate, because over time, including the most extreme, the 2007, 2008 post-election violence, Kenya has demonstrated the capacity to go beyond the stalemate and actually come out stronger. I even believe that even from this crisis that has been created by the protests, my view is that Kenya is going to come out stronger.
Just one last question is that the silence of Uhuru Kenyatta. He has neither come out to make any comments. Is it peculiar, or it is normal? I mean,
I think
retirement
I wouldn't even call it peculiar. I think that is the best thing that he can do
As an immediate,
as an immediate
president.
first president.
Yeah.
As a leader, I think that any things that he needs to do, he needs to do them in the background. I think it's good for Kenya.
Yeah.
That he's not coming out to scream and he should not be there addressing press conference, because then you disrupt all these other processes. I think that Uhuru, I guess that Uhuru was not happy with the election outcome, given that he had openly supported Raila. I think that he was not comfortable with the outcome, but I am happy with the way he has conducted himself. And whatever he's doing in the background, that's what he should do. I don't think that he should be on the front line, trying to append either Ruto or Raila, because Yeah, the political process should play itself
Should play
out,
itself.
and he can play a role in the background.
All right, thank you.
But
Henry.
before you go there, I want to tell you something. When you tell people to demonstrate, you have to be very careful. The British on Brexit gave people wrong information.
Yeah, they do.
And people supported Brexit.
Yeah.
Now they are regretting.
They are regretting, yeah, of course.
So, Kenyatta, don't forget, Uhuru Kenyatta was helped by Ruto to go into position. So you must have a soft spot somewhere. You cannot say that
he wouldn't want to be that disruptive.
That doesn't want to be disruptive. The man actually Ruto made Uhuru. Because Uhuru had only Mount Kenya. But Ruto brought everything for him. So I think he must have a soft spot somewhere.
Yeah, sure. Henry, I'll give you the opportunity to give us the last words on Kenya. Then we shall move towards what is happening regarding USA and Africa summits on democracy. And on that, I'll begin with the doctor. But just your last words regarding Kenya. How best should they move forward? Is dialogue the long-lasting solution? Or they should, I don't know, just your last words on that.
You know, there is a perception in Uganda that if you are in opposition, the best way to oppose is to remain defiant through and through. If you ever get to be seen in dialogue with a man in power, then you've been bought.
You're eaten.
I think I set an example that you see, the reason we get into leadership is not because we have personal goals to achieve. We are doing so for the good of the country. We are doing so for love of the country. The challenge we have in Uganda is you look for love for country and you can't find it within the leaders you have at the moment, whether they be in opposition or in power. So I think it's just lessons for us in the region to understand that often dialogue should win, because we have tried all sorts of options, including violence. And in the case of Uganda, I think we've tried the violence, and violence has not necessarily, yielded the country we desire. And therefore, they are just lessons we carry forward. We have to commend the leadership there, that at the time when push comes to shove, and there is an option to get into dialogue, for the sake of peace of the country, they have taken that option. And that to speak with he who is in power, even when you disagree in principle on certain things, there should be that convergence zone that you need to.
But if there is a record of your other party buying people who have gone to dialogue, should people just ignore that?
No, but you see, they shouldn't. But you see, why? But if that be true anyway, because the behavior of Godbar, for example, if he accepted to be bought, why should I fear to engage on grounds that I will also be bought? But so I think we have to rise over and above these. I would like to see in Uganda, for example, for the sake of reconciliation, this, the opposition, whoever calls themselves the bigger animal, the opposition, facing off with this man and saying, for the sake of the country, we are getting into a zone, like it or not, of transition. Let's talk about these. Let's talk about this country. We want to see this, this dialogue happening. We have tried really the guns. We have tried, and that's the only way we know how. Anyway, I'm not sure it has worked for us. So let's give this dialogue a chance, and I think there are lessons to borrow from.
All right, thank you very much, Henry. I think that puts a full stop to the Kenyan question. Let's just shift gears a bit. And Doctor, I will begin with you. This whole USA Africa Summit on Democracy and the timing, I don't know what exactly is happening. Just paint for us a picture.
Well, the Summit for Democracy, which was launched in November 2021 in Washington, was this year held in 5 different parts of the world. And then these are Washington, Costa Rica, Netherlands, Republic of Korea, and Zambia. So basically, each continent had their own co-hosting function of the Summit for Democracy, with the Biden hosting a virtual opening session for all the leaders that are that are parties to the Summit for Democracy. So in Africa, the Summit for Democracy was hosted in Lusaka, Zambia, under the theme of free and fair, transparent elections for inclusive development. So Zambia had about 30 countries, part of African countries that are summit parties. Not every country is a member of the Summit for Democracy because of the principles. If a country does not uphold the basic principles of democracy, that is justice.
Sorry to interrupt you, Doctor,
Yes.
but I don't know, even as we examine this, does the USA have the moral
I think we'll come to that.
lecture
Let me first say the
Africans
foundation.
on democracy?
And let me come to that question, just to give a preamble of the summit.
Okay.
So for countries to be parties to the summit, they must uphold the basic principles of democracy, and that is a liberty or the fundamental rights and freedoms. Then you have equity and justice. So if a country has gaps, glaring gaps in these three key basics, really, that is just the basics. It is not all that the democracy is about, but do you have a foundation? Or do you have an intentional, act to build a foundation for democracy? So democracy is always an ongoing process. It is not an end in itself. And there are no perfect democracies. But can we have a minimum? So that's what the summit is about. It's not that the US is lecturing Africa. If I may go by the opening remarks of the Secretary of State for Education, who represented Biden at the summit, he said they are here to learn from Africa the good that exists. And they also hope that Africa can learn from the other parts of the world about the good that they are doing. So it's a benchmarking platform for members who have met the minimum threshold. It is not about lecturing one another. And in his remarks, he did mention the challenges. He said the US has, but every country has a different type of challenges. And as a citizen of the world, I would prefer really to struggle with the challenges where you have basics, where you have a foundation of principles, where you have a foundation of systems and institutions. Then we struggle with the challenges as they emerge. But in most of our countries, you find that you don't even have a basis. If you look at the cornerstones of democracy, media, rule of law, if I know that for every Ugandan, if they are suspected of committing a crime, they can have their day in court. And court will rule according to the truth, based on facts and evidence.
And the law.
And the law. I would have no reason to worry to live in any country.
Yeah.
If I know that if I have a right to associate, no individual can, interfere with that right. If I have a right of access to education, look at basics. Education, how many Ugandans have ability to access quality education? How many Ugandans can access quality health care? How many Ugandans can access quality means of life? How many? I think the percentage shrinks every day. We have people slipping into poverty every other day. We have many people living on the line of poverty. We have, so these are the struggles that I wish we could sort out. Contestations and controversies will always rise, and there is no perfect democracy anyway.
All right, I want to hear from Godbar. Godbar, there are those who have very radical thoughts and views about USA and its approach towards democracy. There are those who think that the USA economy was in fact built out of disrespect and indignifying of human beings. The whole slave trade era and things like that, So are they trying to right their wrongs? That is one. Two, is that you look at, for example, Tripoli, Libya today, and and you look at perhaps Afghanistan and the state that they're in, many think that this is all owed to the USA. So I don't know. And now here we are discussing democracy with these guys. How do you make of it?
Yeah. Now, first of all, I believe that there are historical facts that we can't change. That slave trade was there, we can't change it. That's in fact, I should not leave this without mentioning this thing, and where President Museveni keeps on these days, he tells people about that slave trade. We were colonized. No, actually we were colonized because that the chiefs were running around in hide skins. And I'm like, sure. I mean, those were the times. These kings were there at that time. They were at least they were putting on hide skins, which they could go and hunt.
And the feathers.
They could go and hunt. Right now, all of us put on some apparel that made most of it made by some Muzungu, maybe with the exception of Captain Babu, because I think this wardrobe is definitely made from somewhere. Yeah. But essentially, slave trade is a historical fact. Colonialism is a historical fact. Those are facts that are irreversible. We can choose to keep on referring to them to rationalize why we are where we are.
Shouldn't we begin to demand for reparation, for example?
No, I think I am there. I agree with the president. I will not go there. Reparations. It's a track in terms of debate. We can have that track. My view is that as countries, we must organize ourselves. As Captain Babu said, we must be united, build strong countries, build strong democracies to be able to play in the big league. If we are here,
but is China a democratic country? Aren't they playing in the big leagues?
Yeah, because they have fixed certain things. You should see where China has come from and how they have built the economic system, because this was a communist state. They reached a point and said, we are going to do a dual economy. In China, there are areas, there are provinces that are deeply capitalist, because they know, they could see that communism would not be the economic pathway that makes them compete globally.
But you can't say you can't say China is exactly democratic.
No, it's not.
Yes.
It's not.
But they built other basics.
Yeah, so they have built the basics.
Services.
They invest in their people. That's one other important thing. They invest in their people. If you see the way they are educating their people, I always give people the example. When I studied at Stanford Law School, we had a class of 15 students for our master's program. 8 of us were Chinese. I was the only African.
On government scholarships.
On government scholarships. Some of them, of course, paid by the Americans because they want also to bring the Chinese into the US for whatever reasons. But I was the only African. About 2 Europeans, about maybe 1 from Latin America. And I was there thinking, because when I go in this process, I keep on asking, where are the Africans? Where are we? We are 1.4 billion people. We are 1.4 billion people. Where are we? But the point I'm trying to make is that a country like Uganda, or any of these countries you see, these are very rich countries, naturally endowed. Uganda is one naturally endowed country. That again, I use my example of going to go do coffee farming in Ntungamo, and you begin to see how easy it is to grow coffee, and you say, with the right leadership, with the right economic posture, with the right policies, Uganda can be the leading coffee producer. We can probably even beat Brazil, no matter its size. So one is that I think as African countries, we must be able to look at ourselves internally to be able to organize ourselves to compete. Because I on social media I keep on pushing on guys who tell me that you like America, and I keep on telling them, I said there is no amount of screaming that is going to stop the Americans and the Europeans and the Chinese and the Russians wanting to come and exploit resources here. Because for them, they have a plan. For us, we just go into their plans. The other guys, so even these summits you hear, China-Africa Summit, Russia-Africa Summit, Japan-Africa Summit, that's all of them. These are their plans. Do we have ours?
We have African Union.
Eh? Yeah. So you see the point. So in other words, in most of the cases, you hear people arguing and say, America is ordering us. America is imposing their systems on us. And I keep on saying there is no amount of screaming and complaining that is going to stop these people, because they have an agenda, they have a plan, and they will execute it.
And the means.
And the means. The only way I fight back is to sit here in my small country. Geographically, we're a small country, but we're a rich country with the rich people. We can organize ourselves, and we can, at that point, you begin flexing muscles. But the final point I would mark to make is really to amplify the point that Sarah made on the basics of democracy. Every time I believe that when people say America and the West is imposing democracy on us, they're always talking about elections and that one day invade. And I'm saying, as far as I'm concerned, for me, democracy is that environment that enables you to do things. So if you think of democracy as some degree of freedom, freedom is what unleashes the ingenuity of a people. So you'll find that even some of these countries we call dictatorships, when it comes to thinking, there is space that has been created for people to think and experiment and think new ideas. So in other words, democracy, we are talking about creating systems that empower citizens to gain a certain degree of freedom, because freedom is an economic resource. Yeah, if free people are able to innovate, they are able to explore, they are able to experiment. Democracy is you've built institutions of responsibility and accountability. So in other words, at no point would you say there was something that was supposed to be done, but we don't know who is responsible. If that thing is not done, someone is accountable. If you'd come here in Kampala now, they were talking about Kampala, the pothole city, you ask, so who is supposed to sort out this problem? Someone will say KCCA. Another one will tell you, no, the central government, because it has 2 ministers there. Another one will tell you, so many things. You go to each of those of us who come from up country, the road from, in our place, there's a road from a place called Kahunga. It goes through Nyachera, to Rukoni. You should see the garis. And
we'll go to Jaja.
Yeah. So when you ask, but I asked the people in the village, I said, but can't you go and complain about this road even to the chairman AC5? They told me, no, we went. The chairman said the road belongs to UNRWA. Now, you ask yourself, an ordinary person in Tungamo there, you tell him the road belongs to UNRWA. This person has no business with UNRWA. Ordinarily, you want a functional system where the chairman, LC5, the cow knows that they are the ones who can connect this ordinary person to UNRWA, to State House, to the ministry, and wherever. Those are systems of accountability. So that's basically what we are talking about when we are talking about democracy. Respect for human rights and human dignity. That each one of us is our brother's keeper. That today, if Captain Francis Babu was mistreated, because we value human dignity, all of us get outraged that he has been mistreated. Because he's a human being. Secondly, he's a Ugandan. So there you are talking about democracy. So democracy, people complain about America and all these other places because they think democracy is a campaign, and then you go and vote, then you are cheated, then the other one cheats the other, and they say, this thing is imperfect. I think that's really abstract. Democracy is that environment in which you, me, and everybody else can be able to are respected and have the opportunity to exploit our full potential as human beings.
Captain, just your own perspective regarding this Africa-USA Summit on Democracy. Because what we understand is that now there is what we call liberal democracies. And this comes with, for example, things like gay rights, rights of transgender, rights of, the decision in Roe versus Wade that made abortion now legal. And all these are being discussed from the democratic point of view that, humans have their rights. But then how do you compare that with our African conservative values? So my question is, should Africa be able to cherry pick and say, well, the USA, this is what we believe is a democracy. We shall cherry pick and say, okay, first we shall pick elections, we shall pick rights, and the rest. So how do you go about with all this democratic conversation?
One thing, we should not mix American politics with the democracy.
Okay.
There's what you call American politics. Then there is a word called democracy.
Yeah.
You should separate the two.
Yeah.
Democracy, right from the time of Socrates up to now, is the
democracy.
power, is the people.
Yeah.
All right? Now, regardless what system, what model you have, as long as the people of that country are involved in running their affairs, that's a democracy.
That is it.
All right? Now, even the word republic is irrelevant. The word are the people involved in their own destiny. See, we like this utopian talking. I don't know where Ugandans, I think they brainwashed us, these British, when we went to their schools. Think about it. Even before the British came here, we had some form of government. Whether you like it or not, it was there. Now, the question is, how was it running? Was it improving? Because it was, everything was changing. Even the British system from Magna Carta kept on changing for them to reach a certain level of what they call democracy, the American democracy. Now, to me, the government with the people, running it for their own benefit, that's a good democracy. Now, the models, we can argue. Westminster system of government, parliamentary system of government, the presidential system of government in America, the Chinese system. Now, the Chinese are also improving in their system. No, every country would like to improve so that they can get democracy. I would like to thank the Americans for having brought up that level, but not to bring their system, for them to talk about democracy. They're two different things. America cannot be so violent in their own country and be so violent in Libya, be so violent in Syria, be so violent in Afghanistan, in Yemen, on one side. They don't practice democracy in those countries. Then they practice democracy in their country. Then they bring in new things. America tells you they want a rule of law and order. Then they have something called Guantanamo Bay, where they take terrorists. And the rules are not applied there. So, this double standard, I do not agree. But they are helping us to look at democracy. And if they allow the local people to have input in that, that's fine. You understand what I'm saying?
They are double standards notwithstanding.
No, they are double standard. Those lectures they give, that unless if you recognize homosexuals and whatnot, I don't accept that nonsense. I don't. That's not democracy. And by the way, I was reading the Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Declaration. I don't see homosexuals in there.
In 1948.
It's not there.
It wasn't an issue.
No. And they talk about sex, man and woman. They don't talk about sex, man and man. So there's a whole argument.
Actually, just one fact.
That's the debate. I'm unqualified to.
One fact, Captain, just to add to that is that Britain used to celebrate the Magna Carta Day back then, but in their colonies, such was not happening. So I think there is so much.
No. Each country has undergone what we are all undergoing, all of us. In Britain, they had to cut off a king's head. Yeah. In France, they did the same.
Yeah.
In Russia, they killed kings. In America, they killed each other in the Civil War.
Yeah.
These things have happened in every country. Do not be deceived by somebody who is talking utopian language. There's what we call utopian language, where everything is perfect. No, there are people, human beings make mistakes, and they correct those mistakes. Whilst in Africa, I agree that there's a lot of problems trying to build democracy. There's one thing what the British and the Europeans did when they came to Africa after the Berlin Conference. They totally brainwashed our people. And they never allowed our people to even learn their systems. We're learning them now. For 70 years, they sat here in Uganda. What did they teach us about democracy?
Was that part of their mission?
No, it was not.
Yeah, it was not. That's my point.
It was plunder.
What I'm trying to say.
Mission,
What I'm trying to
they
say.
executed it.
They should now give us a chance. And that's why I'm happy that the Americans have come up with this thing where they want to talk about democracy. They should also hear what we have to say about democracy. It should not be a one way.
Captain, I actually think that these guys, one, they are not going to give us a chance.
Okay.
Two, we should not be pleading with them.
No.
We need to start from here.
Yes.
And say, guys.
No. By the way, this democracy you're talking about, even these things, first of all, are these systems we have, do we know how to run them? Even the multi-parties, we have turned them into wars. We are fighting.
These
I
are
mean, like,
civil wars.
I know Dr. Besigye very well. Even Dr. Besigye was the blue-eyed boy of Museveni. They used to sit down and talk nicely. Suddenly, they have become big people apart. They can still sit down. Besigye is a very clever man. Museveni is a clever man. Sit down and come out with solutions to build this country. And then you start bringing me, anyway, the whole point is that because of not being able to sit down and talking like grown-ups, we are ending up with Mickey Mouse.
But as a senior,
running all over
as
the
a
place.
Senior captain, can you tell us why are we not able to sit down?
Because
Isn't that the
no.
bigger question?
Because the people we thought were among the citizens are not.
Are not. Yeah.
So the idiots
Yes.
are in charge,
Yes.
We are in charge, and you can't
and they
move.
can't sit down.
No. They prefer the other system I told you about.
Yeah.
They don't believe. They believe in funny things. But if we had to sit down, let me tell you, this country, Uganda, if we had 1 week of good leadership, it would turn completely.
Yeah.
1 week.
1 week.
That's what I believe. Where you can see people.
You don't need to be nasty to anybody.
Yeah.
1 week.
Yeah.
And you don't need to tell me what to do. You give me a list. I'll tell you that one here. The next day, everybody will say, yes, that's what we wanted.
That's the team.
Wow, our time is fast spent. We need to be out of this place, but I want to thank you all.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
I want to invite us just in 1 minute each to give parting shots. And Doctor, I'll begin with you as I move towards the Captain.
Well, I will say that democracy is not a complicated concept. Its original definition clearly puts it in the hands of the people. Government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Many Africans are disillusioned and they think that the democracy, we can't manage it. We need to think about a different issue. But what are our 3 key challenges as Africa? One is how to manage elections. How to say, come and cast your vote, count it the way it is cast, and announce the choice of the people, the way it is what is our biggest problem.
Actually, the first election we had here, this CA, that man, what was his name?
Akaboy.
Had a fantastic election.
Yes.
Yeah, the CA.
So if you look at the marble system in Gambia, the marble system where people throw marbles in a box, in a drum, and they make sound, and all observers are able to count
the sound.
It is the most perfect election, and I wish Africa could adopt the marble election in Gambia. Our second biggest problem is human rights.
Yeah.
Even we claim to be religious. whether Muslim or Christian, the biggest commandment is love your neighbor the way you love yourself. But how do we treat each other? We treat each other like terrorists. Because you are holding the tools of power. You think you should suppress and kill everyone. The third biggest crisis of governance in Africa is corruption. You borrow you borrow money, make debt, you
Steal
iron
it.
sheets, steal them, you put PDM in press, 30 billion has gone to ghost circles. So really, the three, in my view, are the key challenges of governance in Africa, and let's sort them out, because it's possible.
Yes, Henry.
Yeah, I think the time has come for us as Africans to stop blaming our wars on slavery, colonialists. Because if you look around humankind, nations developed through exploitation. They exploited their own people, then they started expanding tentacles, they came to Africa and so many other countries. Many countries have gone through colonialism and are much better. Even America, we're talking about, was at one time colonizing. So I think we should stop giving these lame excuses of colonialism. Number two, democracy is a value that we must all embrace, whether we are in Africa or wherever, but we should understand it, we should place it in our context. One of the things we need to care about democracy is free competition. Free competition, because free competition will allow citizens to have the power to vote out a government they don't want, or retain a government they want. But also free competition allows different power centers, allows the private sector to thrive and be strong and become a power center. In the country we are in today, if you're a private sector, you are constituting yourself into a power, a power center, you become a threat. So I think democracy should be allowing these, and we need to inculcate them in the values of our children. This is the way to go. Nobody wants to be in any situation that is to the contrary. Thank you.
Yes, Council.
Yeah, I think two things. One is that I'm really watching for Kenya. I wanted the dialogue that they have started to work because I think Kenya is a key country within this region. Its stability and economic prosperity has significant spillovers that can really increase opportunity and prosperity within the region. So really Kenya is one of us, and we need to vote for them to succeed. I believe that as a continent, we have had lots of missteps and lost opportunities. Actually, there have been attempts to try to ingrain democracy in most of our continental documents, especially since 2000. When we started with this new economic partnership for Africa, there have been opportunities where all these countries, or let me say the presidents, because normally they are the ones who negotiated these things. They have recognized one is that you have to be democratic, you have to create freedom for people to enjoy, to harness their potential. So from the new economic partnership for Africa's development, what is the APRM, the Africa Peer Review Mechanism, for me was like a fundamental opportunity for African countries to set their own standard of what, of how democracy looks like in Africa. Of course, now we have these like the protocol on democracy and the rule of law. All these are just documents that are adopted, signed, and they are abandoned. But I think that rather than complain about other people imposing democracy on us or imposing their systems, we've had the opportunity to be able to define what our systems should look like. And I think we should pursue that path. One of the problems we have is that every time there is something like that adopted, they say everybody is in there. I thought that APRM would have actually had major successes if, for example, we said this is the standard. For us, we have agreed as Africans, this is the standard. You only become a member of APRM if you meet that standard. But you see, to get a standard and say these are the rules, then you bring all these countries in their diversity and democracies, autocracies, kleptocracies, and whatever, and say all of us, we are APRM. I think that's where the peer pressure that we are supposed to exert has almost failed. But I think that if we don't define our rules and embed those principles that Francis and Sarah talked about, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, because we embed them in our rules, then others will be defining what we should be doing, and I really, in most cases, I lose sympathies when I hear people complaining, because me, I don't believe that complaining solves anything. Like I said, those countries, they have their agenda, they have the capacity, they are on a mission. They are fighting right now. The West and China and Russia, they are fighting over this region. The fight is intense. I think the Chinese have more or less like now managed to take over the SADC. The center of gravity right now is the Great Lakes region, and there is no amount of screaming about, oh, you are imposing things on us, that is going to stop these guys. The only thing that can stop them is that we are internally organized and we built internal capabilities to be able to start flexing muscles a bit so that we can negotiate our partnership with these guys. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Yes, Captain, you have the last words.
Very simple. All these African countries are like a startup business.
It's a good one. It's a good one. They are startups.
They're startups.
Yeah, startups, yeah.
Startups require organization.
Yes.
The only person who did that very well was Singapore.
Yeah.
When they were thrown out of Malaysia, it was a rock with nothing. And he came out with a program to build Singapore. In that program, there's one word you must have. The word is called honesty.
Yes. Honesty.
You must have a program which is going to create a foundation on which that democracy you want will stand.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, a lot of people, they talk too much theory. They are very nice people. You know, you've been to Harvard, Oxford, Stanford, you know. So
Now,
these are very good, by the way.
Don't ask us to apologize for going there.
I'm coming.
Yes.
What Lee Kuan Yew did, he took his best to those universities.
Yes. That's
He
right.
took them to Imperial College, Oxford, Cambridge,
MIT.
Harvard, MIT,
Yeah.
and they all came back. Then he said, now, you are the team.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Now, we are building. This is a startup. We want to take, and he said, anybody who stands in the way
Yeah.
of building this nation
We crash.
will crush him.
Yeah.
So democracy was thrown out of the window and...
No,
No.
they were building.
What was thrown out of the window?
No,
What do you mean by crashing?
No, we have the rules and everybody must follow.
We are building. How do you build? You start with the foundation.
Yeah.
Now, when the foundation, you don't say, no, we should be up there. Say, no, we are still here. Then you go to another level. Then you go to another level until you reach what everybody is talking about.
Yeah.
We have to build it. It will not come here
Yeah.
by talking good English. No.
And you have
It's
to
hard
be
work and
intentional.
Now, let me give you an
You can't
example.
even bite.
Yeah.
I go to
no,
my
no.
village and we sit. What do we want in this village? You, your family, his family, my family. That's where democracy starts. And we build it from the village to the parish and then the whole country talks the same language. That's what they do when they're starting up a unit. So we are in a start. We've never even gone to a startup mode. We are starting with the roof. The foundation is not there.
We're geniuses.
So
we must now look, where is our foundation? What is our problem?
Yes.
Yeah.
The values, the systems,
Now,
and
our
the
culture.
institutions.
Let's take our culture very quickly as I wind up. The Ugandan culture has got common denominators. A Muchiga Emururu,
Karamajong.
Karamajong. There's something which they have which is common. Have you got it and seen if it can be used as a cementing factor in the whole country?
Yeah.
What Nyerere did, when he didn't find those, he brought Swahili, it became the cementing culture. By the way, Swahili was not spoken in the whole of Tanzania. It was only around the coastal area up to Dodoma. The rest of the country, they did not even know Swahili. But he used it to cement the people. And then he brought one word called Ujamaa, which is a brotherhood.
The brotherhood, Ubuntu.
So, you know, you're talking about let's come home.
And these are the best.
And build our country. Now, those good things you want, or because he's my brother, I must behave. I will not mistreat him. Now, those are the values now you're talking about. Because you have already established we are brothers. There's no way you can mistreat your brother.
Yes. Exactly.
Captain,
Thank you very much.
what a way to bring this show to an end. Thank you very much. I can't thank you enough. Thank you very much. Captain, Godbar, Council, thank you very much for your time. Director Henry, thank you very much. And Dr. Sarah, thank you for your time as well. Of course, to the viewers, it's always a pleasure to have you on our show every Friday afternoon. Well, so much has been said. I don't want to, add a single drop of water in that. Just process it, take it in, and see you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.